Hey, so I thought I would make a short video sharing my deployment thoughts for this game that I've got coming up against Armour from Team France. I'm merking for Team Belgium as part of the Nations Cup event. And I just thought it might be interesting for viewers to get a little bit of an inside look into my thought process, because I'm going to go through this process for myself anyway. So I thought I might as well document it and share it. So just to quickly, but by the way, if you can't properly make out the lists on the screen because my screen recorder isn't high enough quality, then I'm posting them in the video description anyway, so that you can refer there. So I'm not going to spend too much time obsessing about my list because you'll get to see it elsewhere. But basically, my instructions were to try to have a list that can kill large blocks of troops. So we've got 2 Wizard Masters to go for the 2 big burn spells with Pyro and Cosmo, 2 Mortars to do the same thing, just land lots and lots of low strength hits on people. I've got the mounted Prelate to challenge out people with the Locket of Sunna, and the mounted Knight Commander for a little bit of anti-armor, with the Light of the Sonnstahl. And these guys can either form up a bus with the Knight unit, or they can run around doing their own solo YOLO type things. Then I've got the 1+ armor save BSB and a boatload of infantry, with a little bit of shooting mixed in just to try to complicate the board state for the opponent. So it's the sort of list that I quite enjoy playing. I mean, this is a tried and tested framework by now, but it's still pretty new for me. So I've set up the map over here. I haven't loaded my opponent's models, but I'll run you through his list real quick here. So this is a kind of an MSU-ish dwarf list. So he's got the Dragon Seeker. Now, normally I really try to avoid reading the dwarf book just because it's one of those armies that makes me go cross-eyed and bored. But I did do the due diligence to actually read what this guy did, and holy moly. So for those who are also dwarf dyslexic, this guy has 7 strength 5 attacks, which are strength 6 on the charge. He's got lethal strength all the time. Now, he's also agility like 7 or maybe 8. If you've got res 5, then Rune of Smashing makes him strength 10, AP 10. And if you are large or gigantic, then he's multi-wounds against you as well. So for 405 points, this guy is like pretty great against normal stuff and just freaking insane against big stuff. So he should, as usual with any tooled up dwarf character, should not be fought under any circumstances, in my opinion. So I'll be putting a lot of effort into filling him and his other ginger mates full of arrows and crossbolts. And maybe some fireballs as well, just for good measure. Nothing like burning gingers for irony. Then we've got the Engineer General with, I don't know, probably some sort of medium range, medium strength multi-wound weapon, and a good old-fashioned Dispel Scroll, which is pretty annoying. The Anvil of Power, which I gather can cast pretty much any type of buff, but no magic missiles. Like 40 freaking handguns. I got to check to see if these are accurate from memory. And then, of course, they're res 4 with like 4+ armor saves and shield wall and all that jazz. So, like, very, very solid little sturdy units. The Greybeards, just for the anti-panic because he's got no BSB. A big chonky block of Hold Guardians, which is another unit I had to look up the rules for, because I think last time I saw them in action, they were multi-wound too, so that's obviously a long time ago. But this unit is kind of like res 5, strength 5, with a magic banner that can pick one buff spell at the start of the game, and then they can also pick a special ability, which is either Vanguard, +2 agility, or +1 strength and AP. I'll go into my thoughts on these guys in a few more minutes. Then he's got the usual like medium block of Seekers, 1 unit of Miners, 2 Copters, and 2 tooled up artillery pieces. So when I first saw this list, I thought it was going to be kind of pushy because he's got like the tooled up Ginger, all his Ginger mates, and then the 8 Hold Guardians. And I was thinking, like, these 2 units just take Vanguard, shove up the center, and then everything else is just kind of hard to get to because it can defend itself reasonably well. But now I'm thinking that this is actually way more shooty than I first thought, and actually not that pushy. I think it's actually more of a defensive list that sits there dropping catapult shots on you, shooting you with the 30-inch organ gun, kind of flying around with the steam copters, annoying you with the miners. And while all that's going on, it's like, okay, do you want to push into me? Because if you do, then all of a sudden you're in range of 40 handguns. And then to get to any of that stuff, you have to go through the ginger block of death, and, you know, the 8 Hold Guardians. So I think these are like the catches of stuff that can survive the missile barrage. So I think this is actually a harder list to play against than I first anticipated. That I kind of just instantly saw this unarmored Seeker unit, and I've got pyro and bows and crossbows for days, and just went, oh yeah, that'll be fun to burn those up. But it actually looks like quite a well thought out list in the end. So kudos to my opponent, regardless of the result. So let's jump over here into UB. Hopefully that's a little bit more pleasurable for you now to view. So this is map A8. And we're playing Hold Ground, so cap the center. What we don't know is what deployment type it is. So this is going to be kind of like a high-level overview, just kind of discussing what I think the game flow is going to be like, rather than I will put this here, this here, this here, and this here, because all, as I discovered in the last tourney where we were playing random deployment, I spent like 45 minutes prepping for a battle line / marching column / refused flank, and then promptly rolled diagonal and kind of hated my life. But it's still good to get kind of the principles down. Like, I think there's a lot of interesting dynamics to discuss here. So before I talk about, before I analyze, rather talk about, because I haven't, full disclosure here, I have thought not that much about this matchup. So you're kind of getting like the raw grey matter as it's coming straight off the top of my dome. So, you know, the disclaimer here as well is that I'm going to share this video with my teammates before the game, and we'll dissect it a little bit more. So maybe some of my ideas will not make it to the final cut of the game, because my mates might point out some very obvious flaws in my plan or things that I've missed. So that's one really cool thing about team events, is the collaborative approach. Mostly before the game. I'm not so keen on collaborating during games, although that is obviously a big aspect of online gaming these days, which, I don't know, that's out of scope of this video. Anyway, so let's have a think here. So this is A8. We don't know the deployment type, but I think almost all of them, it's going to be, you know, top to bottom rather than diagonals. I basically won't bother prepping for diagonal, given I haven't got that much time or brain space. I think the same kind of principles are still going to apply. So there's two first questions. Is obviously, which side do you want, and do you prefer to play first or second? So in terms of playing first or second, obviously the benefit of going first will be, number one, that the miners will be one more turn delayed, which basically means I get an extra mortar shot, because as soon as the miners come on, the mortars are just dead. It also means that all my stuff, if I'm here and I'm pushing up, for instance, is going to be an extra 1 turn's movement. Oop, don't do that. 1 turn's movement away from the board edge, where the majority of the minor advanced moves are going to come up. Obviously, depending on my mortar placement, because I just expect them to go for the mortars. And also just stuff like being able to shoot off Seekers before they start pushing at me, if he decides to push on me. Being able to, you know, say he decides to target my crossbow with a catapult, for instance, that could be like half a crossbow unit just dead before I get to fire with them. So it seemed obvious, that in a shooting fight, going first is usually better. But it's not always the case. If you've got a more mobile, responsive shooting army, then I'm normally very happy to let the opponent go first and try to counter deploy them. I don't think this army is quite as flexible because as soon as it starts moving, it kind of shoots like garbage. Especially these guys, the Rangers are really, really awesome if you play first because they only hit on 4+, 5+ at long range. So as soon as they start moving, then they just kind of suck. So it's often good to drop for first turn. If the opponent has a high value target, like, I don't know, a Feldrak Elder or a Dragon or something like that, you can kind of just drop your army in a neutral spot where you're happy to go for the objective and push up, and then have these guys drop wherever you want to shoot your opponent from, and just know that you're going to not have any movement penalties in the first turn and have a really good position. So in this case, the prime shooting target for the Rangers is obviously the Seekers because everything else just has way too much armor. So it's just stupid. And also the Seekers are probably the most difficult for me to deal with in close combat, especially with the Super Ginger in there. For me, this game plan is really just priority number one is just kill the Gingers. Just eradicate them from the face of the earth. So all my shooting is kind of going to be focused on that goal, especially the Rangers, especially I think the Mortars, especially my magic as well. So yeah, basically everything is going to be kill the Gingers first. My Imperial Guard and Knights can kind of punch the last few to death. So if there's like half a dozen Gingers left, then it's doable. There's a couple of weird interactions, like my Prelate can potentially challenge the Super Ginger, and they have fisticuffs, but Lethal Strike just makes it really kind of dicey. I don't really want to, even with the stat swap, he still ends up with like 4 strength, 4 lethal strike attacks, and then he's got all his potential runic buffs, and it just feels a little bit unnecessary. I would rather just like shoot the shit out of them. Can I say shit on YouTube? Oh, I guess we'll find out. So that's all the good things about going first. What's good about going second? Well, obviously you get to pick the side normally. And then the other thing is obviously you get to see where the opponent deploys his stuff. So if I was going second, I would probably want the bottom side, I think. And my instinct there is that this corner up here, this is a kind of funny little spot that looks quite protected at first. Like you've got the hill covering your flank. You've got the building covering your flank. You've got this hill shield in your front. But I actually think that this corner is a little bit of a death trap waiting to happen, because if you go in here and then the opponent decides to like push up, then it can be really hard to get out. Like buildings are really, really difficult to play around sometimes. Also, look at the distance to the objective. It looks like that's a good like 3 turns walk, even from the closest point to start contesting that objective. So I'm almost tempted to... I don't think he would ever do this, actually. If I was the dwarf player and I was playing from the top, I would put my Seekers either right here and push them to behind the wall, just to... Obviously, he knows that they're very vulnerable to shooting. Or I would stick them in the forest because they don't care about not being steadfast, and then they've got some cover as well. And then my scoring stuff can go in the middle. Like you'd put the Hold Guardians and the 10 Greybeards here probably, and maybe 1 unit of handguns to like pretend to score, while also covering, this sort of region here. And then the Seekers are kind of like the non-scoring flank guards, because in situations where your scoring unit, your best combat unit isn't scoring, missions like Hold Ground can become awkward if you decide to put that unit bang in the center, because it occupies a lot of footprint when it comes to scoring the mission. So that's one thing that's making me think maybe he wouldn't put the Seekers directly in the middle. The ideal situation for me, of course, would be if the Seekers just went out here, but and that's why I was touching on that idea of this being like a little bit of a death trap in the corner. But I can't really convince myself of any good reasons why he would put them out here, unless I had the chance to deploy first and like put the tank out here as bait or something like that. But I don't know. Even that kind of seems tenuous to me. Not really in love with this plan, given then I'm giving away the position of the tank and not going first. So far my instinct is to play first if I can. And let's have a think here. I think this is a really interesting table just because of the amount of cover that's on here, and more importantly, like the position of the cover. Like this forest is always going to be hugely influential because anyone sticking in there is going to be. This is actually within 6 of the objective. You can see if I put this guy here and we put that thingy on, the blue line stretches all the way to here. You can actually score the mission from well inside the wood. So I think that's quite interesting. Whereas you can see the wall does not score the mission. So this is better cover, but doesn't score the mission. So I think whoever designed this map did a really good job because there's just a lot going on. Like you can hide behind this hill and then jump out, or you can start a shooting unit on the hill. You can, like this, you've got this ruin over here, but if you decide just to set up shop in this ruin, then the opponent can just take over all of this section of the board. And yeah, anyway, we're not here to talk about the map, we're here to talk about the game. So I think I do want to go first if I can, especially in hold ground. I kind of prefer going first most of the time because I just like being able to be the first one who like pushes up and creates a bit of zoning space. Although I feel like the combats here are so polarized that zoning is not really that much of a thing. I don't know, because I feel like my units basically never want to fight. Sorry, I'm drawing a lot. My units basically never want to fight his Seekers. His Hold Guardians, like, maybe. Let's talk about his Hold Guardians. I think his Hold Guardians are basically mental if they take anything that isn't the +1 strength, +1 AP. Because if they don't take this, my Knight unit with my 2 characters can just go straight through them. Like, it's not an absolute crushing thing, but I'd be very comfortable declaring that charge into strength 5, AP 2, Hold Guardians, given I've got Hatred, given I've got the Sonnstahl, given I've got, heaps of combat buffs available. It's like a 50-50. I think I'm winning the combat by like 1 or 2 on average. I did a little bit of pre-game maths already. If he's strength 6, and given he hasn't got a BSB, that's like really shaky as soon as I get a single buff in. I know he's got buffs as well, but I charge a bit further, yada, yada, yada. So that's a fight that I will be looking for 100% if he doesn't take strength 6. And if he does take strength 6, I would still like to have that fight happen, but I kind of want a cherry on top to incentivize me to go for it. Whether that's like if his Dispel Scroll comes out really early, I think that's an immediate tick box that yes, okay, I can go to that fight because it's much easier for me to put a buff in. Or if I can somehow randomly drop a model off his unit, or 1.5 models with, say, like a lucky mortar hit or Quicksilver Lash, something like that. So I'm pretty confident that he will take strength 6 on the Hold Guardians because the tank otherwise is also a really, really big pain in the bum for him. Because unless he drops just repeated Stone Thrower hits on it or his Super Ginger survives to get into it, I think the tank is just doing whatever it wants this game, just driving everywhere. So Um, Apart from once I killed the gingers, I mean my mortars just have so many good shooting targets here. Like seeing the high strength hit multi wound can kill whole guardians. It can kill copters. It can kill his war machines. Even like his 10, 13 man units, whatever, will take a few casualties from all the AP1 hits. But I mean, obviously, these mortars aren't going to be long for this world, given there are seekers, miners coming for them. So I had an idea with these mortars, which was to place them really extreme, like this. And even though this kind of sucks a bit for their range, obviously, you know, a mortar fires in a circle, right? So if you put a mortar in the center, it can fire 48 like this. And if you put a mortar in the corner, then it can only fire 48 like this. So it's only got like half a board to shoot. It's the same as like the principle of a knight in chess. A knight in chess is almost always better in the center or in the inner center. As soon as it goes to the flanks, it loses half its utility. So things where you've got, I know 48 inches is a long way, but you know the table's also pretty big. So if we just measure 48 from this mortar, from this position here, say, okay, I actually don't hate that. This mortar can shoot everything on this side of the building, whereas this one probably sucks a bit more, but can still shoot to that side of the wall, which is pretty decent. So the reason I'm thinking about hugging the board edges like this is I just don't think my army is responsive enough to be able to kill miners in the turn that they come on, which means that these mortars, one of these mortars is going to die, probably in turn 3, maybe turn 2 if he shoots it off. So the reason I want to hug the board edge like this is think about if I instead decided to put my mortars like in what would normally be a sensible position here, yeah? And here they're shooting basically the whole table. Now imagine these are his miners, and his miners come on like here, and they face my mortar, and then next turn they charge my mortar, kill my mortar, overrun like, I don't know, an average distance, and then next turn they've got a fairly easy charge into the next mortar, and hey presto, you get 2 for the price of 1. There's other things like there's a decent chunk of my crossbowmen are going to be, you know, still stationary on the 12-inch line. So what if he comes on over here, kills this mortar, and due to the beautiful round base, kills, clips, overruns, and all of a sudden I've got this unit of, I've got a dead mortar and I've got a unit of dwarves up my jaxie. Seems kind of frustrating. So that's why I was thinking, if they hug the board edges, then not only does it take that unit of miners out of the game, but it also limits their overrun options, because obviously they have to come on, and then where are they going to overrun to? Nowhere awesome, right? Because probably the rest of my arm is going to be in the center somewhere. So the disadvantage of doing this is, in order to effectively cover like this 48-inch, you can see here this is really stretched. The mortars have to be quite far forward. If I put them in the extreme corners, then I think I'm just getting way, way, way less bang for my buck. Look, I can't even shoot him in turn 1. This would just be a disaster. And this one's even worse because there's a freaking hill in the way. So what this means is that by going on the forward line here, I'm more vulnerable to stuff like a unit of handguns that just decides to start up here and then just advance to turn 1 and then shoot me to death in turn 2. But if a unit of handguns is doing that, then whatever, it's like a 190-point mortar or something that was maybe dead anyway. And copters, of course, can be very, very well covered on this map because it just goes here, turn 1, here, turn 2, dead mortar again. But again, I feel like the mortars are really, really nice in this matchup, but they're cheap enough and kind of expendable enough that I can just let them die whenever their time comes and focus on trying to get a resource advantage elsewhere, because I think it's way, way impractical to actually try to protect these. But feel free to disagree. So other key things I'm looking at here is like the fact that my Imperial Guard, normally you don't want to send infantry into a forest because they won't be steadfast, but of course Imperial Guard with my very, very, very not compensating for something, BSB, will be bodyguard stubborn in the wood. So I could very happily send these guys in here and just sit here tapping the mission, tapping the mission, tapping the mission, knowing that even if he charges me, I will be stubborn, provided nothing horrible happens to my BSB. And then I can stick there for a while until help comes. So similar thing, like the tank would probably be quite decent in the forest, but we come back to the previous point around actually wanting your scoring units close to the center here. So it might not be ideal. I kind of like these hills too, because, for example, say my opponent gets the first turn, he's got a 30-inch organ gun. Just look how much of my army I could cover against that in the first turn. I could go like this, I could go like this. The crossbowmen probably aren't going to be thrilled. Say the organ gun starts out here. Okay, that just sucks. I can't do anything about that. If the organ gun starts out here, well, I probably just put the crossbowman opposite and just try to freaking shoot and magic it to death in the first turn. Or I guess I could go in here. Yeah, okay, that looks a bit nicer. That looks a bit nicer. And then, okay, the crossbowman not shooting his seekers, but, well, I'll figure that out. Definitely, I think my units need to be spaced something like this, because I always want to make sure that wherever the knights go, that this heavy infantry unit can still support them. Likewise, and the BSB, I think the BSB is the most important model in this army, and really, really hard to know where to place in, because the army is quite large with these guys running around with the knights off on magical fairy tale adventures together, and then you've obviously got this large chunky footprint of infantry. Just knowing when to place these guys in what order and where to have your BSB, because he's the only orders in this list as well, is a bit challenging. So, but I like the concept of these hills, because it means that, for example, say my BSB starts in this heavy infantry unit, then in turn 1 he can give the +4 march rate order to this knight unit, and they go wee, and then in turn 2 I can charge like most of this corner with my knights if I wanted to. And then my other stuff is moving in mutual support. So, and the same thing with this other flank is that, you know, if obviously this is a ruin, probably not ideal for cavalry, but say you were on the other side and the opponent decides to castle up here, then you can march to behind the hill, and you can march either on the hill or over the hill. So I think this is a cool map dynamic with a lot of options for both sides. It doesn't feel like there's an obviously better side, especially with this wall being placed outside the deployment zone. This is one of the most interesting things in the map. So I had a brief look at this before, and in the end, I think I probably prefer to. I know that the hill on the bottom also looks pretty sweet for, say, just putting these guys on, doesn't it? Because he's only got handguns, so I'm outranging him. Even though it's opposite this forest, I can still shoot basically anything that starts in here. Anything that tries to go for the mission just gets this hail of crossbolts. Anything that's out here. This looks like a pretty sweet spot for the crossbowmen, doesn't it? And you can still maybe, like, if the Imperial go here, then you can still cover fire for them. Just looks, I mean, maybe even a cheeky counter charge into the flank could be a game winner down the hill. That looks pretty tasty. So, I don't really know, which is kind of an anticlimactic conclusion to this, but I think I'm pretty much always going to end up with my infantry somewhat in the center on either side here. It's really just a question of, do I want to be scoring from soft cover, or do I want to be going to hard cover and then jumping into the open? And I think the most interesting question for me, deployment-wise, is probably, where do my knights go? Do I, you know, knowing now that this is a potential death trap on this side, can I knowingly commit my knights to start here, given that this is one of the few units that can go like 8, 14, or they could just ram all the way down here. Like, well, let's call it 18. Let's be optimistic. Maybe even 14. Yeah, down here, and then these guys are kind of dominating down here. And if he puts his Seekers out here, I'm probably thrilled, to be honest with you, because I don't really care. If the Seekers start pushing into this corner, then I just make them waste the game, and the Knights can just run behind the house and just whatever. Like, it's a unit of Knights, but it didn't die, and it took his super crazy Gingers out of the game, and probably I can bring enough force concentration to bear elsewhere that I can win the mission. For context as well, this is a teams game, and going into this round, we're actually very, very up. But we actually only need 10 points to cap the round from our last 2 games. But I'm still treating this as a singles game, or just like without that, knowing that context. Because for me, this tournament is not so much about, eking out a micro win just for the sake of it. I'm kind of interested to try out this list, learn matchups, and just have a good time. So I'm probably a terrible team player because I'm not considering that sort of stuff a lot of the time. I'm always just trying to play the best I can and get the best result I can, whether that's 13 in a really difficult matchup or just putting my foot to the floor and trying to get 20. Don't know. So I guess this crossbow deployment actually seems quite alright. Obviously, I've got my militia who can finish pretending to be miners now. So if my crossbowmen are here, then I probably want my BSB in range of them in the first turn to make sure that they can get the accurate order. So that makes that something like this. That means we probably want one heavy infantry unit out here. And that means we probably want the Knights. I guess these buttholes can go and score the mission from inside the wood. The Imperial Guard is still going to have a decent little... Like, where's that 6-inch get to? Yeah, I can get 2 scoring pretty easily. These militia are also, I think, going to be an ace in the hole because they can walk up to the, say, 12 remaining Seekers, walk up, shoot them, stand and shoot them, and then maybe get a couple of attacks in combat before finally going down. But I could be trading this unit of militia for, easily 3, 4, 5 Seekers. Okay, 5's probably a bit optimistic, but chaffing them at the same time, so they're like 120 points or something, and I stop the Seekers for a turn and bring them very, very close to the end, hopefully by that stage. So something like this might be viable with the Knights out here, and then I guess the tank could go out here because his biggest threat is the Seekers, and if the Seekers, as mentioned, decide to go out on this side, even in the forest, there's just no way for them to get to the tank without just being shredded by crossbows, I think, because like they go 9-ish, then 6, and they're never going to get there. They're just never going to get there. I have so many other units I can just throw in the way. Like the tank can even just drive beside them, do the breath weapon. I've got all just this looks pretty good to me, just given how open this side of the board is for the crossbows. I'm actually liking this position because from over here, it looks really like when I played with this the first time, I thought the crossbowmen could potentially start over on this side, and let's just look at their shots from here. So we've got this hill where shit can hide behind. We've got this building where shit can hide behind. And we've got this wall where shit can hide behind. So what are my firing arcs, really? Okay, I'm covering the objective. Sure. So I'm firing into this kind of region here. This is just terrible, in my opinion, because my opponent would have to be really bad for me to get a decent shot here, in my view. Whereas I have no cover. It's really difficult for me to protect these because any resources I put out here might be completely wasted because my opponent might just decide to stick in here, and then I've got a whole unit doing nothing. The other thought I had was to start here, and then maybe he deploys out of range, so then I can march up, and then I've got hard cover from this. But in reality, what is this giving me hard cover from? Like, look at my arc. Oh, I've got hard cover from anything in the building, which is impossible. So I'll just give my flank to, like, I don't know, whatever's out here. Don't know. I'm much liking the hill better than that. So, and then the cavalry can kind of decide to go and try to box in whatever starts over there. The cavalry can move in to sweep the flank. The cavalry can go out into the death box. If his catapult is dead by then, my characters can jump out into my infantry and let the knights go off on a mission. This still leaves a little bit of room for like my rangers to muck around here as well, which is cute because say 20 seekers decide to go behind the wall, then my rangers can go here and ooh, no cover for you because I'm in your flank. So that looks kind of decent, and look, they'd still be in general range. Okay, I think we might have found the deployment, guys. And actually, you know, even better here, by having the tank on this side, maybe he'd go on the hill just so he can cannon over into some stuff, is what can his miners now, say his miners come and kill this cannon. Now they're not doing anything, literally anything the rest of the game. Maybe they come and try to fight the knights, but the knights are rinsing the miners anyway, so that'd be a free unit. And same thing, if the miners come here, then they've got to try to kill the tank, which is the worst target on the board for them. All right, so I think we have probably solved this table side. And if I drop like this, I am more than happy to play first, yes, because I can just push. These can shoot, I think, tons of stuff. How's my timer going, by the way? Because I can only record 30 minutes in one clip. Oh, I've got 10 minutes left. Great. Let's see if we can figure this out. Okay, let's delete this one here. Yes. Let's move all my stuff back. You notice I'm not actually thinking too much about the ranger positions because it's highly dependent on where my opponent goes. I want to select all of these, and I want to go flippy, 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 flip. Flippy, flip. Okay, great. Now, how much is this building going to mess me up? Well, the first couple of deployments are just easy, aren't they? We obviously want heavy infantry here with their flank protected by the building. I think we definitely want Imperial Guard. Also, I mean, this is kind of like a checkerboard, isn't it? Where you go support unit, parent unit, support unit, parent unit. So something like this. And then it probably makes sense to have the crossbowmen in the forest because similar sort of thing. They're zoning, they're covering a lot of the board. They're in cover in case anything decides to shoot back at them. And I think we could probably mirror this deployment. We could go for like, well, actually the mortar on this side looks crap, doesn't it? What does that look like for us? 48, does that cover a lot? Okay, 48 covers a lot. And so this mortar could maybe even go a bit back like here, and just want to make sure that if my opponent advances in the first turn, yeah, it might be kind of awkward for him to get out of line of sight. Say the Seekers decide to go in the wood, whatever. I think this mortar has a million targets. Look, 48 can even shoot his catapult if it goes down here somewhere. So the catapult and the organ gun are both really problematic. I'm deliberately not talking much about them because I think that I don't have that many answers unless he deploys like a complete potato and just gives me, I don't know, leaves him by himself and lets me shoot it with 18 rangers in the first turn, which I think doesn't even come close to killing it on average. So I'm trying not to think too much about the enemy artillery, to be honest, just because I think I don't have great answers for them. So if the crossbowman angled in like this, they can still see a really good spectrum of the board, which would then let my other boys kind of shuffle over a bit and get my all-important state militia in here because they definitely want to go and complicate the board notice I'm contradicting my own advice by having non-scoring units in the center, but the intention is not for them to be alive for very long. Mostly just to run out in a glorious burst of lead and flesh and, go in under the wheels of industry. And again, like maybe the tank. I don't really like single models in impassable terrain, so probably the principle has to be that the tank goes on this side, which means that the knights are stuck in the death box. But again, that might not be the worst thing ever, because if he leaves this flank weak, then I can shove on him there. Question, if my knights are 1 inch from the building and my support unit is 1 inch from the building, it looks like it is within 8. Okay, so my BSB could start here and give the plus move order here, and then he could jump back into his home after a couple of turns over there, just to give those horses some extra tasty oats in the first turn and have them go extra quick. So is this flank going to collapse? I don't think so, because I can always support it with the Rangers, can't I? The Rangers could even go deep in here, depending on what he wants to do with his Seekers. The tank could be a little bit less annoying and go like here. And then these other Rangers can probably go in front of the building or something. I don't know. All depends where his stuff goes. But okay, well, there you have it. Those are my 2 initial deployment ideas. What do I prefer? I think I probably prefer bottom. Do I? What's happening here? 48. Okay, well, this mortar position is pretty awesome. But I think I still prefer the bottom. And you know why? It's just for the fact that you can score the mission from cover. I feel like if making him come out from behind this wall, I think is asking him for a pretty big commitment. But I don't know, maybe these crossbows having clear shots on more stuff, i.e. being not opposite the wood, is better, is worth the trade-off. But either way, I think my mages are just going to be bouncing around through my support units, probably over here, because I want to probably at some stage bail into the crossbowmen, because things are going to get hairy. No pun intended for the ginger dwarves there. And yeah, just try and kill some stuff at a distance. I don't want to avoid combat the whole game, don't get me wrong. I just think that those ginger ninjas are way too hardcore for my poor little humans to handle. So that's why I want to soften them up a little bit, and then my knights can pretty much ride through all of his other units. Okay, so of course the ideal situation here is to avoid having to agonize over board sides, is just make sure that he wins the roll, and then I just take what I'm given, drop as per plan, and go first, and hope it goes well from there. So, alrighty, I'm going to end this recording here, but those are my thoughts. Let's see what the team says, and let's see how the game goes. Hope you enjoyed a little bit of a dive into Bobo's brain for an evening. Ciao. Okay, so the game has been played. As is classic in these situations, I took loads of screenshots and then went and shut down my computer without saving them. So you're going to have to make do with a few snips that I took during the game and was sending to my friends on Messenger. So my opponent won the roll for sides. We ended up getting marching columns, I think. And he took the bottom side, which I probably wanted in the end. I just felt like the building was going to be more painful than it was worth. So he took the bottom. We exchanged a couple of drops, as I kind of had in my mind. I think I actually started from the left here, and started with my knights, just because they've got a lot of... They're the only unit that's really fast enough to swing around and still maybe try and score the objective, or they can go and hide behind the hill or push against the shooters. And then I pretty much just followed my deployment plan from the discussion. Full disclosure, by the way, that this game was played probably a month ago now, 3 weeks ago. So I'm doing my best to recall things, but I've played probably another 5 games with other armies since then. Anywho, after 3 drops, I decided, look, my deployment plan is already in my mind, fixed. He also put down his Seekers. He started from the right, going left, and he put down his Seekers as his 3rd deployment. He went Copter, Greybeards, Seekers, and I thought, well, this was the only thing I really wanted to know where it was going, and it wasn't even deployed in cover. So at that point, it was a very easy decision for me just to drop the first turn. And so in my first turn, I didn't move much. As you can see, this is actually post turn 1 moves for both of us. I discovered that 24 inches on all of his handguns is actually further than I anticipated, and that's why I was a little bit of a scaredy cat and just stayed back here, which was also out of range of the organ gun. And I thought I just want to try and damage him as much as possible and just see what he does, really. So I lifted off, I think, 10 or 11 Seekers in the first turn with 1 spell, my crossbows and the Rangers. I think the mortars didn't really do anything. Which was awesome. Cutting the Seekers in half kind of means that they can't push. My opponent agreed with me and spent the rest of the game just hiding this unit. So the 400-point Killy Death Uberlord did nothing. These Seekers didn't die, but also didn't kill a single thing in the game. I think maybe I fed them a unit of Rangers in the final turn, but these did nothing. The Steam Tank also elected not to move, which I don't normally encourage because I think it's so slow that you really need to be moving it right from the beginning if you want it to do anything. However, the reason I didn't want to move is twofold. One, if I didn't manage to put, like, say I just had 2 horrendous turns of dice, then all of a sudden the Seeker Lord would be able to kill it. And the other thing is obviously that part of the reason to put it here was I was protecting this mortar from the miners, because if this mortar can fire the whole game, then it's going to be able to do some damage. And if the miners come and kill it, I don't really care. It's not that important to my overall game plan. But I want to be able to kill the miners in exchange. So the Steam Tank didn't move, and because it didn't get -1 for moving, it managed to one-shot a Gyrocopter that was sticking out just a little bit behind the hill here. So that was a really good turn 1. He responds by pushing. By the way, I think in my pre-game planning, I said I thought he would be insane to take anything except +1 strength and AP on his Hold Guardians. And to my delight, he declared Vanguard with them. So they managed to Vanguard up into the forest and then make another kind of move. And you can see here, they're still only halfway across the board. So what was the point in taking Vanguard, in my opinion? Like, they basically spent their entire game power, their turn 1, getting to where they could have just moved in the first turn anyway. They don't want to go and fight, my entire army by themselves. They've got no BSB. They've got some good magic support, like he was buffing these pretty much every turn preemptively with hard target, a -1 to wound, etc., etc. So they were pretty hardcore, but then my unit positions and support charges and all of this means that it's very hard for him to engage me. So I think I didn't play great, especially with my knights and my characters here. So what this building ended up being quite a pain because the knights end up being separated from my battle standard bearer. I feel like in this style of Empire list, or maybe in all Empire lists, the battle standard bearer is the hardest model to get right because he does so many things. He's got the orders going on. He's got obviously the reroll bubble, and then also he's got he needs to give bodyguard to the Imperial Guard. So he's got so many different places to be. I wanted to make sure that he was in range of my Rangers in case he started doing anything crazy, in range of my crossbows to give them accurate because I don't have the engineer in this list. I wanted to make sure that he was in range of my other stuff to potentially give +1 movement next turn, and also in range to jump into the Imperial Guard because I want his bodyguard and range there for later. So as a result, my knights kind of got hung out to dry a little bit, and because his whole in my pregame, I decided I could beat the Hold Guardians in combat, but one of the key pieces to doing that was my Knight Commander with the Sonnstahl sword. So perhaps inadvisedly, I actually bailed both of my characters out of the knights here and jumped them behind the building to avoid turn 1 catapult shots. Now, my idea was that depending on how he decided to play, my characters could potentially jump into my central infantry and bolster them, and then all of a sudden I'm getting Hatred, I'm getting the Sonnstahl, and obviously the attacks from the Prelate, which are meh. Neither here nor there, but and then the armor saves as well, so you can potentially roadblock. So I thought this was valid. What I didn't do correctly was really calculate the distances. So what ended up happening was, because of the mismatching footprint, I couldn't actually get, and the 1-inch rule, I couldn't actually get both of these characters to join the units effectively. You'll see here in the next turn, my Knight Commander could make it and join the Imperial Guard, but there wasn't enough distance from hiding behind the building from the catapult to get to this side of the Imperial Guard. So that was unfortunate, and my Prelate basically did nothing this game as a result. So this is my turn 2. You can see here I decided to push my Knights, which, again, if my Prelate was in there, I would have been even happier with, because the Knights just kind of suck a bit by themselves, especially with the Cavalry picks. They're just hitting on 4s, wounding on 4s, and especially when they get devastated by an entire round of shooting, then they just don't have enough bodies to really achieve anything. Also, another reason that I think it was a bit silly of me to split my characters off is I'm only 1 Leadership 8 panic test away here from just like losing the unit almost, or at least having them completely taken out of the game. So, I mean, I kind of knew this, but after the first turn, but I didn't have any good solutions, so I just decided, well, let's just not fail the Leadership 8 panic test and push them. So I pushed them, he shot the hell out of them and diverted them with the gyrocopter. The end result was, I think I charged the gyrocopter, didn't kill it, it broke, rallied, came back, and then this mortar managed to one-shot it a little bit later, which given that the end result of this was my Knights with 2 or 3 survivors still got into his handguns, and he basically just spent a while flying around with his gyrocopter. My movement here on the Prelate is not good at all. Like, there's so many places that this guy... I was trying to keep this gyrocopter honest, but like, it can hide here behind the Knights, it can hide here and threaten the mortar. If it was me, I would have just gone, well, if the Knights survive the panic test and the shooting, then they're going to get stuck on my shield wall shooters, who are worth whatever, for a while, and I would have just used this gyrocopter to go and kill the mortar. So I think that would have been a better play for him than just using this as a diverter, because it didn't really change anything. It just meant that the gyrocopter wasted the game and then later died anyway, and the Knights still got where they were going. So I got quite lucky that the Knights managed to make their panic check, survived the standard shoot, and then actually got into the handguns here, where they got stuck, ironically, long enough that the Prelate actually came and rescued them and got this unit. So that was a bit of a happy accident. As mentioned, his Seekers just went and hid using the Greybeards for cover at first, and then when the Greybeards started getting a little bit far off the board, and these became my best shooting target, because the Hold Guardians either have -1 to wound or hard target all the time, so I just started picking off like 2 Greybeards a turn with Rangers and Mortars and whatever. You can see I struggled a bit with my movement on the tank here, still getting used to the fact that this thing has to move first. I haven't historically played with a lot of random movers, so this is a bit of a challenge. In my mind, I was thinking somehow I could somehow magically open the way with my Rangers for the tank to drive in between them and then start dominating the center, but of course it doesn't actually work like that. His miners came on the back here. Apologies I don't have more pictures. It would be a lot easier to explain than for you guys to visualize, but I'll do my best with what I've got. So his miners came on the back to threaten my crossbows. You can see my crossbows ate a catapult shot in the first turn, which just ripped them to pieces, but that was kind of a known quantity, and I wasn't too upset, bearing in mind they'd already neutered the Seekers from the game. So The miners came on the back, charged my crossbowmen. My crossbowmen fled like 3 inches when they got charged, and then the miners killed them. And then eventually, of course, my tank just killed the miners exactly like I'd planned. The only difference was that the miners killed my crossbowmen instead of a mortar. But happily, and to my great surprise, both my mortars managed to survive the game. So that was really unexpected and a nice surprise to have both of those just firing 12 shots over the course of the game. I think one put 3 wounds on the catapult, and the other one obviously helped a bit against the Seekers and just random stuff here and there, chopping down the Greybeards a little bit. So, yeah, quite like those mortars. They're cheap and cheerful and just keep pounding away. So the tank, I don't think, did anything else this game except for killing the miners and killing a copter, but I was pretty happy with that. The MSU armies, I think, are pretty hard for the tank to make its points back against. And my opponent did have one very good counter in that Seeker Lord who could just lift it off, so happy for it to just play a little bit coy. Now, obviously, the most interesting thing in this game to talk about is the center, and because my opponent decided to go hyper aggro with these Hold Guardians, then he was winning the mission, and I was quite intimidated by the 40-odd handguns, plus the rune-crafted catapult, plus the organ gun, and then random bomber shots and whatever else. So I didn't really feel that comfortable pushing into the center, which I think highlights my initial instinct that the bottom side is better because you can get probably 2 scoring units in the cover of the forest contesting the center, while this wall looks very nice because it's hard cover and distracting or whatever, but you're not really doing anything from there. You can see my Imperial Guard here. I tried to be a little bit cute and clever using these militia to chaff up my opponent, and the idea here was that he would charge the militia. If he wanted to overrun, then he would hit my Imperial Guard. I would charge him in the flank with 1, potentially 2 support units, and then just clean house. And my opponent actually just outplayed me here and used my own militia to divert me. So he moved these Hold Guardians up to a position probably about 3 or 4 inches up from where they are now, where my militia could, even my general soloing out of the Imperial Guard couldn't legally charge the Hold Guardians because the militia were in the way. So this actually meant my opponent got, I think, 2, maybe even 3 mission points head start on me this game, which obviously is pretty hard to come back from. So at this stage, I'm thinking I've basically screwed this up and I'm going to lose the mission. Thankfully, I managed to rectify my error with the militia. I got them out of the way, and then my opponent, and also jumped my general out of the Imperial Guard because a mounted character in a unit of infantry is just begging to have a catapult shot dropped on it. I do have the Witchfire Guard, so I thought at least I've got a 4+ Aegis against the big rock when it hits me, but it was still a very stupid risk to have to take. But as mentioned, I was quite constrained by my movement with this character to try to get anywhere meaningful, so I actually had to risk it for a turn. I thought it was worth it because the Knight Commander is owning those Hold Guardians so badly if he gets them. So the next turn I actually jumped my Knight Commander out into the gap between my units there on the right, and the militia just got the hell out of the way because I realized that Empire of Sonnstahl don't need diverters when you charge in the enemy turn. And what ended up happening was a triple charge onto his Hold Guardians from my solo Knight Commander, the Imperial Guard with my BSB, who I think ate like 10 casualties from another freaking catapult shot, and some depleted heavy infantry. So the Hold Guardians as expected. Oh, and then what did I get off? I got off Perception of Strength to put him at -1 strength as well. So that it was just a complete slaughter. The Hold Guardians, I think, did 2 wounds, and I did, I don't know, 5 or something, and the Hold Guardians lost combat by 11 or something absurd, and I just auto-broke them. So that then let now that this unit was gone, this was like his doorstop, he's basically got nothing that can fight in combat. I mean, shield wall, toughness 4, whatever, it's still good, but we are talking about sheer quantity of units now. I've got the Knights, I've got 2 mounted heroes, I've got Imperial Guard, I've got, heavy infantry. So I did end up with basically bursting through into the center here, and you can see, here are my the remnants of my knights fighting some handguns. My knight commander managed to get into his organ gun and overrun into his engineer general. My heavy infantry ate an organ gun to the face. And then my other heavy infantry just ended up bunkering while my rangers killed themselves on Seekers and his Longbeards to make sure that they didn't contest the objective. So I actually managed to draw the objective in the end, which I was pretty happy about, given how badly I screwed it up managing that one up. But you can see all my red crosses and stuff here. This was actually me extrapolating the last the last game turn, because my opponent wanted to, very generously, wanted to play at like 3 a.m. his time. And apparently this is a normal thing in France, that they're just happy to get up at random wee hours of the night and start a UB game. So it was a bit of a novelty for me getting to play during the day. I started the game at like 10 a.m. in the morning on a Sunday. It was just awesome. Normally I'm the one who starts at like 10 p.m. and finishes at 3 a.m. So this was really nice, novel experience to me. But, the roosters were crowing outside and his wife was saying, "Come to breakfast." So in the end, we actually said, look, the round between our teams is over. I think we were the last or second last game to play, and we'd already capped the opponent. So he just said, look, I'm going to go. Well played. You're clearly winning. You figure out what you think is fair and just send me what you think the score should be. So I was pretty fair and generous, I think, in determining what I thought would happen. I kind of tried to give him the maximum possible points based on what I thought he could achieve. But at the same time, my position is really good here. I think no matter what he does, I'm going to be able to get a bunch more units and points here in the final turn with my magic, with my shooting, with my charges. So the end result that he agreed on with me was it was going to be 15-5 to me, including a drawn objective. So pretty happy with that. Bearing in mind that I was really rusty with this army. This was, I think, my third game ever with Empire and my first one of this tournament. So my opponent was absolutely lovely. By the way, bit of fun trivia. My online handle is Bobo, and his online handle is Bubu. So it was Bobo against Bubu in the UB room. But yeah, absolutely lovely opponent. And thanks very much for the game, and I hope you enjoyed the report. On to the next one.